So how many of you guys are in, obviously work directly in IT, like you're putting out IT fires every day? Most of the room, cool. I like to speak at that technical level, I don't always get to. So how many people do IT management? Few people I saw raise your hand twice, that's cool. How many people are not involved in IT at all? A few. Nick. Raise his hand back there, cool. All right. So what I want to talk about today is there's a huge problem out there. It's called ransomware. How many of you had to have dealt with the ransomware problem? It's okay to admit because I would imagine that just about everybody in the room has. Okay, it's one of the biggest issues that's out there. We see clients from all the way from law firms, banks, to healthcare systems dealing with this problem. Okay, it's a huge, huge problem, and I want to tell you a little bit about some strategies to be successful with defeating the ransomware problem. I've done a lot of research into this. It uses the dark web too. How many of you know what the dark web is? How many of you buy drugs on the dark web? So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. Obviously, with the name of Buzz, I get this a lot. And then sometimes I get this. But realistically, what I want to show you guys here is in 2015, there was a situation where we had about 59% of all reported, figured out attacks were cyber hacking or cyber crime. Okay, what that means is people are actually using and stealing data for fraud purposes to make money. Okay, and so in order to talk about ransomware and about the different ways that ransomware can get in and the ways that hackers can get in, what I want to first talk about is the reasons why they do it. Okay, because a lot of people, I think, in my industry and security would come up here and say, we got this really cool exploit that we can do, and boom, it works like this. But nobody really understands why. Okay, the reasons why the hackers do this stuff. And hopefully I don't turn anybody into fraudsters today because it's super easy. Okay, 59%. 6 months later, that jumped up to almost 2/3. Okay, a little over 2/3 of all cybercrime, of all hacking attempts were cybercrime at that point. Okay, so let's look at March of this year. It's almost 3/4 now. It's almost 75% of all cyber stuff is in cybercrime. Okay, and we do have a little bit over there in cyber espionage, cyber warfare, those types of things. How many people are familiar with what happened between Iran and the United States a few years back? Okay, so we apparently created a program that would go in and infect some of their nuclear facilities to see if they were actually creating weapons-grade plutonium. Okay, I'm not sure why that's happening. Okay, there we go. Back, both monitors back. One, we got one. Okay, so they were actually. Nick's sitting back there. He's got a little sticker. He's like, "Let's make this fun." We actually created a worm to go through their nuclear facilities to check on certain things if they were creating weapon-grade plutonium. Well, after they found out we did that, so Iran was trying to figure out how they could sort of get us back or return the favor. And how many of you are familiar with the drones that we have flying all over the world? Pretty significant amount of drones out there. But they have basically a go-home command. And in their go-home command, you basically put a latitude, longitude, a little code. Okay, so Iran was able to link up to one and change the go-home command to an Iranian airfield. So this drone, when our operator said go home, actually landed in Iran, which is interesting. So some of that cyber warfare stuff goes on, cyber espionage stuff happening all the time. It's increasing. Matter of fact, U.S. Cyber Command about 6 months ago just became its own branch of the military. Okay? So again, this is a big deal. But if that's such a big deal that we've created a branch of military, how big of a deal do you think this is? It's pretty significant. This is also from March of this year. Now these were actual breaches that have happened around the world, and you can see we have pretty much a baseline between 3,500 and 2,500 a day. Okay, so and these aren't necessarily all cybercrime, but these are from around the world. So that's just March. Okay, and this stuff is people are out there getting data, compromising companies at an alarming rate. Again, so what I was going to show you there, you can see that one of these things here, JP Morgan and Chase. Interestingly enough, they have about a $300 million cybersecurity program. Did they get hacked still? Absolutely. Okay, so it's all really about risk and how you control risk in your organization. Okay, you got to look at what do you think is the most likely way somebody will get in, the opportunities they have to compromise that thing, and whether or not they're actually going to be able to get in and that kind of stuff. That's all based on risk. Okay, so again, these guys threw a lot of money at it, and they still didn't stop the problem. You might, on a long enough timeline, you're probably going to get hacked. Okay. So you just got to try to do your best to eliminate the risk that's involved in there. We're going to talk a little bit about fraud now. How many people know what Bruce Lee has to do with fraud? Anybody? Absolutely nothing. I'm just a fan of Bruce Lee. Good movies. So I want to talk a little bit about how some of this fraud works, and we'll go through this in just a little bit. I think I know what the problem is. This Wi-Fi access is trying to log me in. I'm just going to go do this real quick. All right. So, in healthcare. So, can anybody tell me why they think somebody would want to steal their healthcare record? Insurance, yeah. Defamation of character. Okay, there's a few of them. How about just making a lot of money? Okay. I know that sounds weird right away, but let's think about this. So an attacker comes into a healthcare facility or an insurance company, and they exfiltrate those records. Okay, they're looking for as much of a record as they can. Okay, and when these guys do this, these guys are just attackers. They're just hackers. They're looking for a quick sale. So they go out on the dark web, out on the black market, and they're looking to sell it to somebody. Now these guys that buy this stuff, these guys are big-time organized crime. We're talking about the same people that do the drug sales, the prostitution rings, all those types of things. That's who does this now. Okay, in some cases we have organized crime syndicates that have actually moved out of traditional organized crime and are actually doing this type of fraud now because it's more lucrative and less risky. Okay? So these guys go out and they find a buyer. And right now they're selling these anywhere from $35 to $50 a record online. Okay? So if I just hacked into Cigna Insurance and I pulled 1 million records down, you think I'll ever have to work again? Probably not. Is that ethical? Hell no. Okay? So what these guys do then is they go up and they set up these shell companies. Okay? And what this are, they're using like national provider numbers and things like that are public information. They're going to pretend that these doctors actually work at these shell companies. Now, if you're Medicare or Medicaid and the U.S. government and you see charges coming in from the Cayman Islands, that's going to look kind of weird, right? Interestingly enough, you can set up shell companies in Delaware and Florida too. Okay, so 2 states in the United States where a lot of this type of fraud originates from. So they set up these shell companies and they bill Medicare and Medicaid for fraudulent charges. Now they're looking for serious things like surgeries and stuff like that they can pull a lot of money back, and they're doing this at a very quick rate, so they're doing it electronically. That's the difference. This type of fraud is nothing new. It's happened since the 70s. Okay, just the fact that they can do it on 1 million records a day is where we're at now, opposed to 3 or 4 or 5 records a day. Okay, on average, these guys get about $2,600 a pop. So now if they just bought that 1 million records from somebody for $50 a pop and they sold them for $2,600 a pop, it's a huge markup, right? That's why there's a black market for this stuff. Right? Eric Holder's on record saying that this is a $90 billion a year issue currently in the U.S. Okay, and doesn't include insurance fraud that just happens with insurance companies that sell insurance to people like you and I, or when we get up to our work. This is strictly for these government programs here. Another type of fraud that happens is carding. Wells Fargo, not Wells Fargo, oh, they're in my brain today. Home Depot and Target, those two organizations have experienced this type of fraud. Basically, an attacker gets in there. Target, they went through the HVAC system. And they were able to compromise the point-of-sale system. Okay? And they exfiltrated that data, and they went out and they sold it to fraudsters. Okay? Those are the guys, again, in organized crime. And they're not always in the U.S. A lot of them aren't in the U.S. A lot of them have global type of operations. Okay? They're almost like countryless, if you will. Okay? And these guys, what they do is they take those credit cards and they go buy different types of stuff like iPads, the Android phones, just those kind of really hot electronic devices that are out there that people are just going to snatch up. They actually have their own HR departments, believe it or not. And the reason why they have their own HR departments is so they can recruit people called drops. Okay? And these people, they look for people that have been out of work for a long time. They basically approach them and say, hey, we're an out-of-country organization. We have a certain job we want you to fulfill. And once you do that job, you put the money that you make into our account, and you can take 10% off the top. Okay? So they drop ship those items that they bought through those e-commerce sites to their drops. Their drops go post them on eBay or on the eBay equivalent that's in other countries. Okay? And they sell them. And they get the money back, and they put that money in these accounts, and they keep a little bit, and everything's hunky-dory, right? What happens when law enforcement comes into this process? Where do you think they start busting people at? The drops, exactly. And do you think the drops know who they're actually working for? No, not a clue. Okay, so again, this is pretty lucrative. The black market for cards has been flooded so much that this is only down to about $5 a card right now. Okay, again, it's a supply and demand market. Works just like normal business does. Okay, so they've had so many cards that they're not worth much anymore. Another one I'll talk a little bit about. We had a little bit of a conversation before we got to this one, before today, this morning rather. But this one's called commercial account takeover, and it happens when an attacker gets into your network or gets on your computer, gets your online banking credentials, and then starts filing ACH transactions out of your bank account. Now the interesting thing is this happens to people a little bit, but this happens to businesses mainly. Okay, attackers target businesses mainly because I'm going to use Bob's Construction as an example. There's no Bob's Construction in here, is there? Good. I rue the day that I raise my hand and somebody says, yeah, I'm Bob's Construction, and I'll have to use a different example. But so Bob's Construction, do you think Bob has really good security on his laptop that he uses to pay bills, to do payroll, to log into his bank account? Maybe he lets his daughter play video games on it and do YouTube, all that kind of stuff. Probably not. So it's pretty easy for these guys to get into that type of a system. And all they have to do is have you click on a link in an email or call and say they're from Microsoft and hey, we got this new update, we need to go out to this website. Okay? And so they do that, and they get his online banking credentials, and they log into his bank, and they start sending his money in different places. Okay, now banking has done some protections to prevent this now. So we talk about the evolution of security, right? So that's when the bad guys do something, good guys come in and create a process to prevent it. Bad guys evolve their process to get around the new controls that are in place. So the banks have actually come in, they started doing callbacks and things of that nature. So if you have a charge that seems, or a ACH transaction that seems out of bounds, abnormal, like maybe it's going out of the United States or something, they will actually call you back. Okay? So what the attackers had done is they start social engineering the bank and changing Bob's Construction's information very slowly, one piece of information at a time. They'll call in and say, hey, my wife was in the other day, she said that you had my social security number wrong, it's this. Or hey, I got a new phone number, this is Bob, you know, this is my information, this is my new phone number. Okay, so eventually they get enough information changing on Bob's account, so when they do the callback, they're actually calling back the attacker, not Bob. And of course they're going to say, yeah, wire that money out, right? So the banks, again, came back with two-factor authentication. So now, instead of just logging into Bob's bank account with his username and password, you got to have the little device that has the little code on it, right? That's a pretty good protection. Well, evolution of security, attackers are now trying to compromise Bob's CFO and Bob's accountant. Because they're saying, okay, so those people actually have legitimate passcodes to log into his bank account. So now we're going to compromise those people and socially engineer them to transfer money. So they get an email that looks like it's from Bob that says, hey, go in and wire this money from this this account to this account. Okay, a lot of times that they just do that, and especially if the attacker has actually been in Bob's email. Okay, and they can figure out how Bob actually communicates with people, they can make it look pretty legit. Okay? And a lot of times the CFOs and accountants don't even recognize that. So if you have an organization where this could potentially happen, you know, have your CFOs, have your accountants actually call the president or whoever would be wiring money out, the owner, have them call them back when there's an ACH transaction like that. That's a good protection for that. They can socially engineer within the company, but it's really hard for them to actually socially engineer phone calls. So obviously with all this stuff that can happen in the fraud market and the black markets that come up from fraud, there's secondary black markets that are popping up now. Okay, when you actually click on a link in a phishing email, what that does is it tries to establish what's called a tunnel. Okay? And that tunnel allows you in Windows systems to send pretty simple DOS commands back to the system. In Linux systems, it allows you to send pretty simple bash commands back to the system. Okay, so what they want to do is that. Now, that requires a payload to be run when that link is clicked. Okay, so there is a secondary black market in exploit kits now. Okay, they're going to try to exploit that to get that tunnel open to create that connection between the two machines. Okay, so there's people that can write exploit kits. Malware kits that are out there, new malware. Why would somebody want custom malware written? I might have a slide on this. Because of the way antivirus works. Okay, so antivirus works with a blacklist right now. Unless you have Cylance or some of those newer products, it works with a blacklist, and that means that a program has to have been seen by an antivirus company in order to develop an MD5 hash. Okay? Those MD5 hashes go on a table. When a program comes into your computer, the antivirus checks that program against the MD5 hashes it has in the blacklist. If it doesn't appear in there, it allows it to run, right? If it does appear in there, it shuts it down because it's a known virus. So custom malware, do you think it appears in those blacklists? In products like Cylance, you know what they're doing. They're actually looking at baseline configurations of different system stats, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, how it can actually be used to identify some ransomware. Okay, but what it does is it looks at your processor, it looks at the service host.exe, it looks at Windows cryptographic services, all those different types of things, and says this is how they usually run. It's running out of bounds, and this program is making it running out of bounds. So let's look at this program. Let's just stop it for right now. Okay, that's how some of those second generation antivirus and anti-malware solutions work. So again, black markets there that are opening up. There's even, if you go on the dark web and you want to look for somebody to phish another organization for you, you can do that. Just like you can come to us and have us phish your organization to test out your security, you can actually find nefarious phishing sites and nefarious security people out there as well. This is somebody we kind of know in the industry, Mitnick, but he wanted to. So there's a situation that's happening right now with security researchers, and active exploits and those types of things. So security researcher, let's just say they go to Apple, they find a vulnerability in Apple. They tell Apple about this vulnerability, and Apple sends them a cease and desist order. Okay? So they got their hands slapped. So a month later, they go back, and this is still a vulnerability. Apple hasn't fixed it. So the security researcher is looking for a way to expose this. A lot of times, they will just tell the public. They'll just come out with it and say, yes, this is a vulnerability. The second option is they can actually go post it on this sort of eBay for zero-day exploits. Okay? And this is absolute zero-day. It's sort of an eBay for zero-day exploits. Okay? And so what that means is anybody can come buy a zero-day for Microsoft Explorer. Anybody can come buy a zero-day for Apple iOS 10. Okay? And security researchers post them up there because sometimes their price is $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. Now, if I'm a organized crime ring and I make $2,600 a pop, do you think that's going to cost me very much out of that total to buy somebody zero-day? So there are some security researchers that have kind of gone over to the dark side and done some of this stuff where they're actually selling their zero-days that they find because the company won't fix them. Okay? I'm not advocating that. It's still definitely not ethical, okay? But it does happen. Also, let's go back and talk about this real quick too. So if let's just say you're a software developer. Do we have any Citibank people in here? Okay, that's good. Let's just say you're a software developer at Citibank, okay? And you make $40,000 a year. Right? And somebody approaches you online and says, hey, I heard you're a programmer. Do you want to make $40,000 in the next couple of weeks? Do you think a lot of people will take that? That's what they do. They woo you with cash. And they usually win. Everybody's got a price, is what I've heard. So we're in a sort of environment right now in IT where we can't sit behind our firewalls and our antivirus. We used to be able to do that, right? 10 years ago, you used to put up your firewall, put up your antivirus, and you just kind of watch traffic, right? Put out IT fires. Okay? Unfortunately, it's not like that anymore. But we did talk a little bit about the evolution of security as a concept I wanted to kind of draw on throughout this presentation. So again, dark web. How many of you heard of it? Just about everybody? Okay. Has anybody been out to explore it? Don't be afraid to raise your hand because it's kind of interesting. There's also a lot of stuff out there you can't unsee, so be warned. Basically what's happened is if a search engine can search a piece of the web, it's considered part of the surface web. Okay? So developers can actually put a tag in their HTML to where the websites can't be searched. Okay? Now, if those websites aren't searched, they're considered to be in the deep web. Okay? You have to actually know the address to go out there to get to that website or know the URL to get it to it. Now, the dark web is a small portion of the deep web that's essentially hidden. Okay? It uses a process called Tor, and Tor stands for the Onion Router, which is actually created by our government to assist with hiding certain technologies online and also evading certain filtering technologies. Now, Tor was actually used for good during the Beijing Olympics. And what they were doing is there was a group of people handing little USB sticks out that had Tor browsers on them that they could connect and they could get outside of the Chinese filtering. Okay? Because everybody in China was seeing that everybody from China that was competing in the Olympics was winning, which was not the case, obviously. So in order to see who was actually winning in different events, if you weren't at those events, you had to be able to log on to the web outside of the Chinese firewall. Yeah, obviously with this, and the way this works is you just download a Tor browser. It's usually a snap-in, snaps into like almost like a dried out, kind of burnt down version of Firefox. And you have to type in certain types of addresses. Tor addresses all end in .onion, kind of like Google ends in .com. These all end in .onion, okay? And you find them on message boards and in IRC chats and those types of things is where you find these addresses. Okay, so again, it's a bastion for all sorts of illegal and unethical activity. There's guns for sale, there's drugs for sale. I'm talking a little bit about the drugs thing. Silk Road 1.0, how many of you have heard of the Silk Road story? A few people? Yeah. So Silk Road was actually started by a guy that was at college at the time, and he wanted to sort of take a little bit up off the top of drug sales, and he wanted to turn it into an e-commerce business. And so he actually went out and found drug dealers and hooked them up with people that wanted to buy drugs through an e-commerce site called Silk Road that was out on the dark web. Now, the FBI was looking for this guy forever. They knew that there was somebody running this website or a group of people running this website, and they could not find him because he was using Tor. He was hiding his assets. Okay, now another thing that Tor does is if you connect to it, if I go out and connect to Tor, it'll actually pop me out in a Tor node that's in a different country. Okay, if I reset that connection, it'll pop me out in a different country. Okay, and so what you can effectively do is almost teleport to different countries and run traffic from different countries. Okay, so I get a little leery when somebody says that this traffic came from Beijing or this traffic came from North Korea, because you can fake that. Okay? So again, it's a place for a lot of illegal and seedy activities, but the Silk Road thing, this guy, they couldn't find him. And he actually had a couple other partners that he was doing this business with. And he screwed up and he hired an undercover FBI agent to kill one of his partners. After they did that, they shook him down and found out he was actually the one that was running Silk Road with a couple other people, got him to roll on a couple other people, and Silk Road 1.0 came down. Guess what happened a couple months later? Silk Road 2.0. Yep, run by somebody else. Somebody that was just waiting for that business opportunity, okay? So again, this happens with drugs, happens with guns, happens with a lot of different things. Even the child porn industry, unfortunately, is able to use this technology to hide a lot of their assets. Okay? Now, one thing that the FBI and that our law enforcement agencies are doing, and NSA is involved in this too, is they're going out to these Tor nodes, and they're actually compromising Tor nodes in other countries. Okay? The reason why they're doing this is because if you compromise a Tor node where people come out, where that traffic actually comes out, you can start peeling back the layers of that onion. Okay? Now they can't peel it all the way back, but they can start to see, okay, we narrowed this geographic region down where you guys are actually coming from, which helps them a lot. Right? It still doesn't solve this problem at all, but it does help out. So last I heard, the FBI had a bunch of Tor nodes compromised in Russia, interestingly enough. Goes back to that cyber espionage, cyber war. So again, I did talk a little bit about how they're .onion URLs. Again, it's an interesting place to go check out. You still got to be careful out there, obviously. So now that we learned a little bit about how the dark web works, how do you think it's involved in ransomware? Okay. Parts of the droppers download stuff from the dark web. Okay, these addresses are actually built into the dropper, built into the installer. And so when it's actually going to look for part 2 of 3 and part 3 of 3, it goes out to the dark web. Okay, it uses Tor protocol or a protocol called I2P, which is very similar, and it goes out to the dark web. So some of you with like really analytical minds are probably starting to see a really good way to cut down on some of this ransomware stuff, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But ransomware usually comes in through one of 3 methods. Okay? The first method is spam attachment. This is a super common method, unfortunately. And so I got one not long ago. Things that tip you off, .br, that's outside of the United States. We don't do business outside of the United States. Well, SPS does now, interestingly enough. So there is you can see this little attached file, and what happens in that attached file, it has a little macro in the background, okay? And that's going to go out to a certain edge server that's either on the web, or either on the deep web or on the dark web, and start pulling those files down. Okay? Another way that you can tell that this is probably not legit is it's really quick and to the point. Check this out. Okay, they always do that. They always want you to get that curiosity going. Oh, is this Miss Black? Did I get something from her? Am I supposed to? Did something fall through the cracks? So it kind of gets your curiosity going a little bit to go out there and check out what that is. Okay, again, protections for this, and again, we're talking about decreasing risk. Are you going to be able to protect against this type of activity completely in your organization? No. There's always somebody that's going to click on stuff, right? If you can narrow down to who those one or two people are in your organization and start whitelisting all their internet access, that's probably a really good protection for that. But again, look at the address. Another thing to think about too through all this is, was I expecting this email or was I expecting this attachment? I think I have a slide here. It's later. But essentially, we did a campaign for a customer, a phishing campaign for a customer, and we used the Hillestad.com logo. Okay? And I asked the people afterwards that clicked on it, I said, do you subscribe to Hillestad.com news through your work email? And they said, no, I don't. I said, well, then why would you have a Hillestad.com news article in your email? Okay, just something to think about. Should I be getting this? Where is this coming from? Those types of things. Drive-by download by browser exploit. Okay, drive-by downloads happen a lot. There was an interesting this is way back in 2012 now, but NFL.com and Amazon.com actually had users that got compromised this way because what had happened is an attacker had compromised an ad roller. Okay, and they put a JavaScript in the ad roller, so anybody that visited either one of those two pages during that time got compromised. I think there's like 12,000 or some potential compromises there. But that's actually really hard to get exploited into an ad roller anymore for that very reason. But another tactic they use is called waterholding. Now we've seen this happen before, but it's a situation where, let's just say your HR has legitimate access, or not HR, your marketing people have legitimate access to Facebook. Okay? And a legitimate Facebook friend sends you a legitimate link, hey, go check out this recipe site. Okay? And so you're interested, that person's interested, goes out and checks out the recipe site. A lot of times what has happened is these recipe sites and different sites that a lot of people go to don't have very good security. And so the attackers actually compromise those sites. And then anybody that goes to those sites, it's just like you're clicking on a link in an email. It's just like they're calling you and telling you to go out to one of their websites they own. The same thing happens. You download a payload, try to get that shell, and they start hacking you from there. Okay? Again, that's called waterholding. That's pretty prevalent right now, especially with like any type of site where a lot of people go, like the recipe sites thing come to mind. Not only that, but like, how many of you have heard of Etsy? They're actually super good against this kind of stuff. They're one of the ones that are out there that are really trying to crack down on website hacking and stuff. It's interesting. You wouldn't expect that. Again, protections, reputation-based web filtering helps in your organization. So that basically works. I'm sure that a lot of you know how that works, but it basically works if a website has been reported hacked enough times, this reputation starts sliding down. So you can set certain settings in your web filtering that if reputation is below a certain point, you're not going to allow employees to go onto that website. Okay. Website waitlisting. How many of you have tried this? What? How was it?
Painful.
Painful. Yeah. IT overhead and website waitlisting is huge. So if you got a lot of IT people with not a lot to do, you can try website whitelisting. That might work. Also, application whitelisting is along those same lines. It's a really good protection, but extremely hard to do right. Okay. Other ways that this ransomware can come in, it can be downloaded by other malware. What an attacker tries to do, and we call this an attacker's kill chain. Okay, a little bit of military terminology there, but what happens here is the attacker is trying to get you to click on that link, or they're trying to call you to get you to go to their website. And if you do, they establish that initial connection. Okay. Now, And this is the reason why in IT we lock down restricted privileges on workstations, right? Because if they just clicked on a link and they ran a piece of software and they're an admin on their machine, guess what happens? So is the attacker. Neat, huh? So you got all these, and when, I think that Joe said the CIOs and stuff that have admin privileges on their machines because they want to be able to install like iTunes and their own software and stuff, right? That is a double-edged sword, huge double-edged sword. Okay? That's probably a lot of the reason why they're the ones that get compromised a lot because, again, if they click on a link, the attacker's going to come in with the same privileges they have on that machine. So again, we do restricted accounts to help protect against that. Security awareness up here to help protect against clicking on stuff. This is layered security. Okay? So if you do have restricted privileges, the next thing an attacker is going to do is try to run an exploit. Okay? So they're going to come out, and this is a good reason for vulnerability management and patching. Okay? So if the newest exploit for Windows is not patched and there's an exploit for it, they're going to probably try that. There are a lot of different exploits out there that are kind of like the golden standard, like these exploits always work because nobody ever puts this Microsoft patch in, or nobody ever does this certain Adobe patch because it breaks other stuff, right? In IT, that's the challenge that we have. We have to balance security with the fact that we have all these like legacy programs that are going to break if we put in a certain patch. So. Again, vulnerability management is super important, and then from that standpoint, once they get in and they compromise a workstation, they're going to set up TCP dump and some other programs and just start listening to the flow of traffic. Okay? And they're going to try to start rerouting, do some ARP poisoning, start to reroute some of the other traffic in the network through that terminal that they're listening to, so they can find out where your database servers are, and they can find out how to log into those database servers. And once they do that, they're going to use that machine that they've compromised, they're going to weaponize it and use it to attack the database service. And again, that's how they get that information. They're going to spool it up and they're going to exfiltrate it out. A lot of times they encrypt it before they do that. A lot of times they'll do this through an encrypted communication. So all you see at your firewall level is you just see another encrypted communication going on your firewall. How many of you actually break that encrypted communication down to the proxy server? Anybody doing that? No? That's a good place to go if you can get there. What it actually does is hops in between that SSL encryption or that TLS encryption and breaks it down and then resets it up. Same thing that a hacker does in a man-in-the-middle attack, except that it's kind of done for good reasons, obviously. I just wanted to show this real quick so we can kind of look at, this is our old company. If you haven't heard, Helix was acquired by SBS in July. I was formerly at Helix. So this is our website. An attacker might go down to the bottom and see that we're on Facebook. Okay? And then what an attacker might do is they might come up with a phony Facebook account, like this Miss Muller here. And they might try to message Helix Security or one of your companies and say, hey, check out this really cool thing. Again, what are they trying to do? Trying to get you to click on that link. You need to train your people in marketing and stuff not to click on this stuff, okay? Because this is a really good avenue to get into companies right now. And everybody thinks, oh, it's through Facebook, it's secure, right? Same thing as email. Everybody thinks, oh, my IT people got email so secure I can click on anything. Nope, not the case. So what somebody might do in marketing is they might come up and say, oh, Brittany Muller, yeah, she looks legit. She went to University of Minnesota, lives in Sioux Falls, works at Lawrence and Schiller, right? Yeah? No, this is a fake account. Okay? One of the ways you can tell a fake Facebook account, and the reason why they try to use attractive young ladies is because it's really easy to get guys to friend attractive young ladies. Okay? So beware of that, guys. If you have a girl that's trying to friend you and you don't know her, beware of that. So another way to tell is like how many pictures do they have, how much of a picture history. So if you go to her photos and she's got 3 photos in there from last week, and the account was created, a month ago, Or if the account was created a month ago and all 3 of her photos are from a month ago, that's probably not a real person, is it? Probably not. Or if it is, it's probably not worth your time. This is an example of an email that we created a while ago, and we said Donald Trump is coming to several locations in South Dakota. Okay, it looks legit. It had an Excel file attached to it with his stops. So open up this Excel file and look at the stops, with a little macro that ran in the background that connected back to our listener and gave us a TCP shell back to that computer, okay, which we can start typing in DOS commands. So again, this is what I said to that organization. I said, you know, were you expecting KellandNews.com in your email? No. Okay, then why did you click on it? This one was so successful, actually went viral, and actually got back to Kelland, and they said, hey, this is a fraud alert. We had listeners. Our listener was picking up IP addresses that were way out of scope. So like, shut down the listener. And I had to shut that down, obviously for reasons that you can probably speculate. So, pretext calling. Again, how many people have heard like somebody from India call, hey, I'm from Microsoft? Yep, this is pretty common. They don't usually call companies. Sometimes they get a company, but they usually call home users for this. Okay? And what they're doing is they're trying to get you to go install something or go off to a website they own. And as soon as you put that website in your browser that they want you to go off to, that's when the attack starts. Okay? So if you're having fun with security, and these guys call, say, oh, I can't get to that website. I've run through a proxy server. I need you to actually put this website in on your end first, and that's a website that you own with some viruses that you want to put on their machine. Right? So yeah, John Strand, he's a guy out at Black Hill Security, talks a lot about active defense. That's what that is. Okay? Start hacking back on these guys. Make their day horrible. Okay, because their idea they're like electricity. It's the path of least resistance. They want fast compromises, and if you make it too hard for them, they're just going to hang up and go someplace else. The reason why they might use this SpoofTel product is because they can actually clone a Microsoft number. So if you're going to do some checking and you see your caller ID comes up with this number and you type it into a web address and it says it's coming from Redmond, Washington, and Microsoft, you're like, oh, this person really is from Microsoft, right? No, that's what they want you to think. My oldest daughter's 20 and she's in college, and for the longest time, this is the only way I could get a hold of her. I'd have to actually spoof her boyfriend's number. Go out and play with that. It's a fun app to play with. So again, what can be done for these types of call situations? Passphrase for call protection. So let's just pretend you're a bigger organization, and I'm an attacker, and I call in, and I find out the number of your help desk, and then I use that, and I clone that, and then I'm going to go call a user. Hey, this is the help desk. You have some weird activity on your computer. I need you to immediately go to this website so we can check it out. Okay, that's the type of an attack that they would use. Okay. And if I'm spoofing your help desk number, it seems pretty legit, right? So a way you can protect on this is if you have a user that gets called by your help desk, tell them to ask them what the passphrase is. What's the passphrase? An attacker won't know that, right? But like IT could set up a passphrase like pork chop sandwiches or something, right? Boom. Website filtering heuristics, again, is a good one. I'm sure that EarthBend has a ton of nice solutions on some of this stuff. Stay away from raw IP addresses unless it's an internal IP. Again, if you hover over a link and it goes to some IP address that's out on the web someplace, probably not a good idea to click on that. For IT, re-imaging schedule really helps a lot. There can be custom malware on stuff, and the only clue you have that it's out there is the system is slow, the system is malfunctioning, it's not pulling up stuff right, those types of things. So look for those types of things. If that's the case, you got to kind of decide whether or not you want to investigate it. Okay, and there's some options out there. Redline is a product by Mandiant. I think it's free, where you can actually go take a disk dump and a RAM dump of the computer and see if there's malware that's hidden on that machine. Google also has a very similar product there that they put together. But re-imaging will take care of that, obviously. If you have a situation where you think you might have been hacked, if your computer's malfunctioning or it might have been hacked, sometimes it's just the best idea to re-image it and move on, right? Virtual environments, obviously kind of a godsend. How many of you people use virtual environments? Virtual servers, well, virtual desktops. Use virtual desktop situation. Okay, that's a super good control for this type of stuff. Okay? Obviously, if somebody logs off and that session on that machine resets every time they log off or log on, that's cleaning that environment. You're essentially giving them a sterile environment, so to speak, to operate in. Again, if you suspect that there's malware on a machine, consider forensics investigation. And there are, again, some ways out there. Forensics is pretty deep stuff. SBS has a forensic unit, forensics team. But you can dabble in it if you're interested and curious. There's some solutions out there. There's a lot of free stuff, free tools out there. And just finding, purposely infecting a computer and then seeing how that virus looks on a forensic dump is kind of a fun activity if you're bored some night on a Friday night. Another way that it can happen, that malware can get out there, is open Wi-Fi access. And I really kind of harp on open Wi-Fi access. Open Wi-Fi access in this type of setting doesn't exist that much anymore, but I find it more than I should. Okay? And if you have your phone not set to ask before it connects to different Wi-Fis, your Android phone and your Apple phone will connect to these just promiscuously. Oh, hey, here's an open Wi-Fi. Sweet. Oh, here's an open Wi-Fi. Yay, right? Make sure that it asks you before it connects to that stuff. That's a protection that Android and Apple have put in to prevent that type of a thing. But essentially what happens on an open Wi-Fi, if you're using a connection that's open and you go to a website that requires a username and password or that transfers a lot of information back and forth, and that's not secured with TLS or SSL, all that information just happens in clear text. Okay? And so for a long time, this was how a lot of attackers were getting username and passwords and stuff. They just sit at open Wi-Fi connections and listen. Okay? And actually listening isn't against the law. What's against the law is if you use what you picked up when you're listening. Right? So open Wi-Fi attack software, there's Wireshark. How many of you use Wireshark? It's a great tool for just diagnosing wireless problems, network problems, all kinds of neat stuff. But that's out there. People use that for bad things too, obviously. Kidney is a wireless sniffing tool that's out there. Cain and Abel was one that was used a long time ago and still used today to pull those credentials out of that clear air transmission through open Wi-Fi. Okay. It's interesting because when somebody comes to us, a customer comes to us, and they're president of their bank, their email was hacked, and they convinced the CFO to wire transfer $30,000 out. A lot of the times we trace it back to open Wi-Fi. They were in open Wi-Fi in a different country, usually. Easy creds, now that's an interesting one. That will actually help with this next attack called a man-in-the-middle attack. Okay, so this is when the attacker actually creates their own Wi-Fi. Okay, how many of you heard of Pineapple or any of those other products that are out there? Pretty neat to play around with. They do have, obviously, security research use, but are legitimately used in attacks too. With Pineapple or other similar technologies, the phone, some of those other things. You can actually put up a wireless access point that looks like another one. And then you can actually attack the legitimate one and cause it to come down. Okay, so when people or users from the organization come in and they're looking for the access point that they should connect to, they see yours that's named the exact same thing, and they connect to it, right? That happens. Okay? So they connect to it, and even if they are opening up SSL and TLS, easy creds that some of these other programs can get in the middle of that encryption because the Wi-Fi access point is owned by the attacker. Okay, so they essentially have the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. They break down this encryption and then they re-encapsulate it back to the server. Okay, so even if you're on, let's just say you're on an attacker's access point, and you go to your bank account and you log into your bank account, even though that's encrypted, they can still get your credentials with this type of attack. Okay. Just pulled it right out of that data stream. So again, watch out for that. Another interesting attack there, besides taking that down, obviously is putting an access point up, making it look like an access point. We talked about taking the other one down or attacking the other one down. An interesting series of, or an interesting thing that can happen in a hotel. So if you're in a hotel, there's usually a lot of different access points, right? So if you see an access point that's named the same thing, but it's open, it's not encrypted like the other ones, some people connect to those. Some people are just looking for that open Wi-Fi so they can get on Facebook and they can get on their apps and stuff. Okay, so that's another attack route there. Now, Apple and Android have done a little bit of work to defend against this sort of an attack. So in the newest versions of the operating systems that they have, they've actually put in a flag that says, okay, last time you were connected to this network, it was encrypted. It's not encrypted now. Are you sure you want to connect to it? Okay, so if you ever see that, beware that it could be this type of an attack, and don't allow your mobile device to connect to that. I wish that Microsoft would get up on that, those type of protections, and actually put them into the software for laptops and other mobile devices, but they're not quite there yet. So. Phone, this is an example of a phone. This is a device that's out there for security research. Obviously, it can be purchased for various reasons. If you have a Nexus 5 or a Nexus 7, there's actually a community version of phone out there that you can buy or download and use free. These devices, again, this one allows you to do Bluetooth type of attacks, and this one allows you to do Wi-Fi, 2.11 attacks. How to protect against that? Create a policy, no unprotected Wi-Fi whatsoever. In some access point or some software on your laptops, you can actually configure not to connect to open Wi-Fi access at all. Okay, so if you have a situation like that, that's a really good protection. Another option is to mandate hotspots. Okay, so if your people are traveling, if they're going to be out of town or they're connecting remotely, have them take a Verizon hotspot with them or an ATP hotspot. Okay. It's a good option rather than just connecting to an open Wi-Fi or an attacker-owned access point. And teach users how to spot unprotected Wi-Fi. I mean, the icon looks different in Windows, it looks different in Mac, it looks different in Linux. Just teach them to know what they're looking for there. So a little bit about how ransomware actually works now. Yeah.
Wi-Fi and vehicles.
Yeah, that's good. So there are vehicles now that are coming out with Wi-Fi, and that's basically a cellular hotspot that they turn into a Wi-Fi. Vehicles are notoriously not created without security in mind. I don't know if a lot of you have seen the recent articles published by other colleagues in the industry where they've hacked a Jeep Cherokee and they can actually get it to stop and go with the device that they hacked it with. Okay? They hacked that through a Bluetooth connection. Okay? So open Wi-Fi in a vehicle just adds another point of entry, honestly. Now, if you secure it with a pretty good string, a pretty good password, but definitely make sure you secure those Wi-Fi points if you use it in your car. To kind of answer your question. Yeah. So again, there's a lot of guys out there, a lot of guys and girls that are hacking not only cars, they're hacking airplanes. Basically, these huge networks that are in these airplanes and in these cars, they're put there so that the different systems can talk to each other in the car or in the airplane. There is literally no security in there. So if you ever find a car that has built-in security, that would be a diamond in the rough for sure. So talk a little bit about, any other questions on that, on the Wi-Fi stuff? Talk a little bit about how ransomware comes in. So there's been a number of different revisions to this, and I'll kind of set this disclaimer out there. As of today, this information is accurate. We talked about the evolution of security. Somebody could come out with a new version of this tomorrow. But this is kind of the way it works. So ransomware uses what's called a dropper. It's not necessarily an installer, but it takes different parts of a file and combines them. A lot of the times it uses Windows services to do this. Okay? Now these droppers can come in a number of different ways. It can be attached to an EXE. I've seen them attached to Flash. I've seen them attached to PDFs. I've seen them attached to just about everything that's out there. And what they do is when they come in and you click on that PDF or that EXE or whatever, you're actually launching that dropper. And so that dropper runs with that ID. So if you have somebody with restricted software permissions, do you think that that dropper can still effectively do it? Absolutely. You don't need to be able to install software to be able to run this dropper. It's something that's version of CryptoWall. Okay. So if you can take this, if you look at this as a series of events in ransomware, okay, if you can stop ransomware at any point in this chain of events, you can stop it. It won't propagate through your network. Okay. So again, some of the things that help with that, application whitelisting does help in this situation because it's looking for a certain hash on a certain program type. Windows does have application restrictions. We talked about restricted accounts not working on that. The next piece after it does that, it actually injects itself into the SVC host. It's a service that runs on Windows operating systems. So does this happen in a Linux environment? Does this happen in a Mac environment? Does it happen in a virtual Windows environment? Sure can. Okay. So it injects itself into the SVC host, and the reason why it does that, again, Windows-only service, the reason why it does that is because it's actually collecting data to create its own key that it's going to send out to the dark web to get the encryption key back and those types of things and set up that Bitcoin account and all that kind of fun stuff. But what it does is it pulls that computer, it creates a unique ID for that computer, that MD5 hash, and it sends it out to the dark web. Okay? It sends it out through Tor or I2P. How do you think we're going to take this part of the chain of events down? Firewall. Is there any reason why you'd have a business reason to do business over protocol Tor? Probably not. How about I2P? Block those protocols. Those should never leave your firewall, period. Okay? Unless you got somebody that needs the onion router out there, right? Block Tor traffic, block all I2P traffic for your firewall, alert on these types of traffics too. If you can alert on those, that's a good sign. Like if you get a bunch of alerts that this computer is trying to access Tor, and you're monitoring that or you're having that email hit you in the face, that's a good sign that that computer is probably infected with ransomware. Okay. Or that somebody's doing something they probably shouldn't be from work, right? Buying drugs, buying guns. After that, CryptoWall actually, once it gets that MD5 hash back from the dark web, it will start to create those cryptographic keys, the public key and the private key. It'll set up the Bitcoin account out in the wild out there. It'll give that Bitcoin account to the person that's the attacker, okay, so they can get that money out after this is all said and done. And then it uses another Windows service, the Windows cryptographic service, okay? And it actually searches for UNC paths on your computer, and it will use that service to not only encrypt your computer, but encrypt anything it finds out on your UNC connected network. Okay, so if you have like a J drive or a M drive or any of those network drives out there, it's going to go find that. And it's going to start encrypting all that stuff. Okay. Obviously, those of you that have dealt with this, how many of you had to restore from backup? Okay, that does happen. That's actually the most common thing that happens with ransomware is they end up installing and reinstalling from backup. Yeah.
Does it hit a Google Drive or a OneDrive or a
Absolutely.
Map or a so
Yep.
you have to take all of this
That's a good point, Phil. Phil just said that this will actually hit Google Drive and some other things. And anytime you have a drive or one of those cloud services that creates a drive on your computer, essentially what that's doing is creating almost a site-to-site VPN and then taking that and forming a UNC path back to it. So again, this is going to find it. It's going to encrypt all that stuff too. Okay, that's a mess. If you have a bunch of cloud stuff over stuff, that's a serious mess. Okay. So can we shut down the Windows cryptographic service? What does it do? There's a bunch of stuff that it does actually, unfortunately. And I think that's why the attackers, obviously for obvious reasons, it encrypts. That's the big thing here, right? But another reason why they chose that service is because it does a lot of different things. Okay? A bunch of different things. Root certificate, update service, protected root service there, provides management for catalog database. Now, on some users' computers, you might be able to shut this down. I probably wouldn't shut it down domain-wide, though. Again, if you can stop any chain of events in here, you can actually, in this part, you can actually use shortcuts instead of UNC paths. So instead of having a J drive, they have a shortcut on their desktop that says J drive. And all it does is it shortcuts it back into that. It's not a persistent UNC path. Okay, so it's another protection here. And again, the best way to actually do it, to actually shut it down, is block those two protocols. You can block those two protocols. That's kind of the super defense here.